How's it going, everybody? Good morning. Carpo Josh here again, early in the morning. I just woke up. It's still dark out, and my first thoughts in the morning were, um, well, about books, about reading. And then I woke up and I was like going through my comments, and I noticed somebody mentioned something about the Kabbalion from my yesterday's video, and how it was a possibly written by, I think the guy was William Atkins. I forgot to mention the guy's name during the video. I think that was his name. But there's been a lot of controversy over whether or not he wrote the book. But the person mentioned that he had had a mental breakdown. And I thought about this for a minute, and this is a recurring theme with all very important work, is that the person who does the work will often have a mental breakdown. In fact, some of the most amazing engineers, successful scientists, people like Tesla, um, Einstein, they all had breakdowns in their later years because it's such an overwhelming abundance of stimulus in the world that it's really impossible to derive a direct conclusion about what God is, what life is, what anything is. So we have to create little systems. And I've understood this the whole time. One thing I've always enjoyed is the idea that religions were given to each area for what works for them. I mean, even merely having the idea of you can't eat swine in Islam, so many different opinions of where that may have come from, but the idea that pigs don't produce anything except meat. It's a wasteful meat. It seemed like that work was organized around that idea. Anyway, a lot of the best authors have had major breakdowns. A lot of the people who have come out with some of the most important books have had moments of insanity, I guess. And personally, I've had a few. So I know what it's like, and I understand. I've never had a mental breakdown like that, and I hope I never do. But my hope is that I can fill myself with enough information through experience that I can derive my own conclusions, good basis. So what I wanted to do was kind of take a moment to go through some of the most influential books that I've had in my life. And I guess I'll start off, and I'll try to go in order here, but they're not really going to be much in order. Anyway, I'm going to start off with one of the first books that I read about apocalyptic type stuff. This is Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper. And I read this in 1996, I think. And just flip to a random page. The police state's test case. Big Brother wants to know and tax all. Eventually the New World Order will eliminate private property, redistribute the wealth. It's time to stand up with a weapon and scream enough. This kind of stuff. This is the kind of stuff that gets people really... Stamps. Gets really people upset. And it goes on to talk about UFOs and all this stuff. Now, I read this back when I was, 18, 19, 20, I don't know. I can see the pattern of my type of thinking and where I was going at this point. It wasn't too much longer when I read Collapse by Jared Diamond, and Guns, Germs, and Steel is also in there, I just didn't grab it. How Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed. This is an essential book for anybody who wants to see why we're screwing ourselves, but I don't think we really need this book to tell us why at this point. But it analyzes old cultures and sees why they collapsed. So then, we've got The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot. A lot of people, dispute this book or, say, oh, well, there's a lot of speculation in it. Honestly, I haven't read it since it came out. It's an older book. It's not old. I think it was in the, 90, gotta be in the 90s sometime, maybe 2000. Oh, 92. I read it in more like 2000 or 98, I think. But amazing book. And it's like almost there, just can't quite grasp why the holographic universe exists. It can't grasp itself, in other words, but I'd have to reread that one to really know. This one was fun. 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl. And this is Daniel Pinchbeck. And this is more of a psychedelic-based type. It correlates psychedelic usage with understanding life. I can't describe the book. It's too complicated. And as life went on, I began to get into different things. Here we've got The Wisdom of Confucius. This is a really old book. It was my father's. It was the only book I still have of my father's, actually. And copyright 1900. The Wisdom of Confucius, that's all it says. It's a great book. And I've had it pretty much all my life, and I've never read it until recently. I'm glad, because I never would have really understood the meanings. It's another more recent one, Words to Live By. This is just these are just books that have really affected me personally, in one way or another. Maybe not necessarily in a good way or bad way. This is just little things on selfishness, on pettiness, on enthusiasm, on knowledge. All men desire by nature to know, Aristotle. I just love this book. A while back I got into dreaming, The Art of Dreaming by Carlos Castaneda. I don't want to hear about Carlos Castaneda, because I know so many people just, all they can concentrate on is the fact that Don Juan was a fraud and that he never existed, and none of that matters. The information of a book speaks for itself. It either resonates with you or it doesn't. It doesn't matter if the author's under a pseudonym or if they're crazy. It's a matter of the content. You have to be very cautious, though. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, a lot of people read a book and they get into it, and that's all that matters. But this is another one I read way earlier. This is my first real book that was about this kind of stuff. Moving Zen, Karate as a Way to Gentleness. And it was about a Westerner who went to Japan to study to be like a karate master, and it goes on to explain how he can focus his energy past the items, how how they can break boards and books, or boards and bricks and stuff, and I understood the whole focus point, the focal point past, and this allowed me to see many other things too. Like if you have a focal point in your future, you focus past the present to where you want to be. It's very, very symbolic and a great book. Then, DMT, the spirit molecule. This is Rick Strassman. He's a medical doctor, and he did a bunch of experiments with DMT, dimethyltryptamine, to see how it affected the patients, whether or not it really opened up interdimensional pathways or if it was all in the head. Inconclusive. Very fascinating. I don't know what else to say about it, because if you're not into DMT, you're not going to be into that book. Then we have this one, Ethics. It's just a textbook, but it's phenomenal. It takes all our ethical contemporary issues and theories and asks why and what does it really mean. There's a whole chapter dedicated to, what is God, world peace, hunger and resistance, types of ethics. It's I think it's just essential reading for any human. It's just, ethical issues are important to us. And, well, this one's The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. There's not much I can say about this thing. This is loaded with everything. Mythic Christianity, Rosicrucianism, alchemy, astrology, Atlantis, every type of philosophy, Francis Bacon, anything you can imagine that's about secret societies or the deeper work of these things. And when I first got into this, I couldn't quite understand it. I understand it a lot better now, and still I'll understand it better in the future as I pass various degrees of knowledge. Then we have the last two, which are Pharmacognosis and Pharmacopoeia. Best friend bought me these. Good friend, anyway. To my friend and brother on the solstice, 2009. And this book, basically, it lays out in poetic fashion many of the different herbs, plants. It's called Plant Teachers in the Poison Path. And, this is my path. I'm a poison path follower, okay? And I don't deny that. I used to pick at myself about it. Like, why consume substances? and then I'd be asking myself, well, why not? Everything we eat is a substance. Everything we consume, whether it be light or minerals, they're all from the earth. And I guess by seeing plants as not an enemy or an addiction, but rather an ally, on one hand I can fool myself in some regards, and on other hands I can see that I'm not really doing the damage that I think I am. In other words, like let's say society tells you that if you smoke pot that you're going to be like this or like that, and people believe it. And I know that's not true, at least for me personally. And with most of these other substances I feel the same way. This one breaks down everything: mescaline, total alkaloids, and peyote. It breaks down the percentages, but it also has a very poetic nature where it talks about, it's got corn, explains where the ergot comes from, has some, ancient scribbles and scribes. This interesting little correlation between the drugs on the back. The Poet of Plants, Dale Pendle. And this one is The Power of Plants, Poisons and Herb Craft. And this one is kind of an instruction manual to understand, here's heroin and the nature of addiction. We've got the perfumes of poison, the poisoning wells, and all the different ways that we associate with nature. And this book right here, I guess not realizing at the time, is basically a book based on alchemy, which is another correlation between what I was speaking about yesterday with that other book. Alchemy being the transmutation of the soul, transmutation of the being into a higher state of vibration or essence. Now when people hear this, when I hear this, people say this, I kind of shudder sometimes and think, hey, that's more New Age bullshit. It's more New Age bullshit. And I understand where people are coming from if they hear me say this and think, you don't know that's for sure, or, we don't know if we really have vibration. I do. This is my belief, and this is one of the few beliefs that I actually have that are solid. Is one of the rules or laws of life is that everything is vibrating at a various rate. This is through observation, not just through people telling me things vibrate. This has taken years of understanding why. What is a vibration? After I got past this old model of the atom where you have an electron spinning around a core and realized that atoms are really empty space, that everything is just a field of energy, then it's merely just a pulsating group of atoms. And beyond that atom, really it's just a bunch of whatever quarks, components, particles, whatever you want to call it. I really enjoy quantum physics and how this works, but I know the limitations of quantum physics. Because as soon as you start measuring these things, they start changing. That's how quantum physics works. Just by observing things with machines, it's very difficult for all of us to grasp. So we have to set aside the science of it, really, and just say what resonates with us, what feels right, and vibration makes the most sense. So the whole idea behind alchemy is transmuting your way of thinking into some way better. Now, better is subjective often. Maybe you're doing really well and you end up getting yourself into a hole. I don't know. This is individual. But for me, I see that alchemy is really a way of, it's something I've been actually working on for many years now. Mostly in the last few. And very strongly in the last one or two, that I've really been making my best effort to not lash out at people when they're being inconsistent or when they're being rude. Try to hold back some of my sarcasm and satire, satirical type attitudes. I'll tell you, for those who know me and those who watch my videos, you may see me sometimes being sarcastic or may seem spiteful towards somebody who has a rude comment or something. As if I can't just let it go. The truth is, I do let it go. I don't let the anger get to me. It doesn't change my attitude. But I feel like if people allow people to trample over them, then they're just a victim. So I speak my mind, but the things don't bother me the way that they would years ago, where I felt like I had to defend myself. And it's because I know who I am. I mean, I've always known who I am, but it's just growing. And we're so stubborn to think that we know what we need to know right now that it's hard for us to move forward. It's hard for me to move forward in learning. And this is why books are the key. And some people will tell you you don't need any books, that the universe can be understood without books, and that books will just complicate things. I could not disagree more. These books are written by people who spent lifetimes trying to understand the same things that we are trying to understand, and then put it down on paper for us. And now it's all available. All of these books have come around. Many of them are gone. Many of them have been destroyed in various libraries. So much of this ancient mystery school knowledge has been lost to time and lost to religion as they burned the libraries to try to eliminate this type of personal power. So we owe it to ourselves to at least acknowledge what is left. If it was so strongly hated, why? Because the church always wanted to have power over the people. It's just the nature of the institution. And by giving people personal power, it allows them to find themselves. But by giving them personal power without hope, or without understanding of the greater meaning of life, then merely they're just free to do what they want and to wreak havoc on themselves and others. This is why it's, in my opinion, a fine balance, a very fine balance between religion and reason. A person can have a system of belief that helps them. And that's just the way it is. It's always going to be that way. People will attach to particular ideas. And at one point or another, in most people's lives who go through this type of thing, you'll have a moment of clarity, many moments of clarity. I know I have. But you'll also have moments of insanity where you're sitting on the couch out of the blue and all of a sudden you say, what the fuck is all of this? Pardon my language, but that's kind of the way I feel sometimes. Like, it all just hits home at once. Like, what is all this? Wait a minute. Okay, even if God created this, or even if it just came out of nothing, regardless of all the shit we've been told, really, to stop and set aside everything we think and say, what does all this mean? That's the kind of attitude I've had to have in order to understand my world better. To look at it with an open eye, a fresh eye, a child's eye. And that's where the child mind comes in. It's fresh. It's ready to explore. So, crappy cameras. So, anyway, just wanted to say that the idea of reading books, some people say that reading is a bad idea, that, not a bad idea, but that reading too much into these things can cause you personal grief and whatnot. And I do agree with that. And this is why much of this literature goes past most people's heads. And if I'd read, say, the Kabbalion 5-10 years ago, it would have gone completely over my head. I would have thought it was just another New Age type way to look at things, or an old age disguised as a New Age type thing. But today I see that's different. I see that the intention of the author was not to profit, was not to try to prove anything. It was a group under a pseudonym, or a man under a pseudonym, who decided he wanted to release this information without being hated upon. Many of the pseudonyms and people who have, written books under these have been out of fear of persecution, especially by the Catholic Church and various other institutions. So I believe that, with people risk their lives to write these books. People risk their lives to pass this information on. And say for the uninitiated to come on and to say, let's say, read the person who's never looked into any type of occult knowledge, to read the secret teachings of all ages, it would just mean absolutely nothing. And the last 3 years of thousands of hours of Manly Hall have only partially prepared me for some of the information in there. I've studied deep into the occult, into religion, into Rosicrucianism. All of them have their strengths and weaknesses. None of them seem to be complete in their own essence. That's, I think, the key, is that they're complete for where they need to be complete. Because everything exists within the all, but all the independent components make up the all, no matter how much we separate ourselves. You and I are on separate sides of the country or the world, but we're right here in each other. We are in the same space. So, anyway, these are just some conclusions and ideas that I've derived from the books that I've read, and I've found them very helpful. And I always find it ludicrous when people say, that if you learn too much, that you just can't learn too much. You just can't. But you can overfill your brain if you're not ready for it. So take it in steps, and this is why people go in degrees. It takes a while to process the understanding that you've learned. And once you've learned that understanding, you can't just go tell someone what these things mean. You can't just say, oh yeah, by the way, about these symbols and this and this. And it goes over people's heads, and I know this because I have had people try to explain this to me in the past, and it took my own studies to understand it. And once you do understand it, a lot of the times you just want to keep it to yourself because people don't get it. And this is why so many secret societies have just kind of faded away. Never really went away, just kind of disappeared out of the public eye. This is why so many wise men keep their mouths shut and say nothing. I'm starting to see this pattern where when people reflect to a certain point and have certain realizations, they're unable to share that with the world anymore. And then they either become hostile because people don't understand them, or they become arrogant because they think they know more than others. And rather than sharing the knowledge, they clam up and use it for their own gain or their group. That's the step I don't want to ever take. I want to gain all the knowledge I can, share as much of it as possible, and hope that it'll better mankind, better myself, better my environment, because it's really the only fact I have to go on, is that if I improve my world, it will feel better for everyone. And that's something I know is a fact. So, anyway, got long, but I hope I got my points across. Books are fascinating to delve into, but if your mind is not prepared, the pages will appear blank quite often. So, take care, everybody, and hope you all have a great day.